right, so through the power of social media, looks like we are live once again. Patrick Whaley, your friend in the mortgage business, here with another edition of the Wicked Awesome Report, broadcasting every Tuesday and Thursday morning. Joined by my co-host, Declan O'Toole from Select Real Estate. Good morning, Declan.
Good morning, Patrick. How are you?
Things are well. Things are well. And we have Declan to thank for our guest this morning. We have Andrew Berger from Berger Adjusters. Good morning, Andrew.
Morning, Patrick. How you doing?
Things are good. Things are good. So in our sort of pre live broadcast prep here, you just got off a plane, so you're joining us from the airport. Where in the world is Andrew?
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I'm traveling to Indianapolis right now for commercial property loss. Had a bad fire about 3 weeks ago, and trying to service the client during this obviously very chaotic time.
Sure.
Yeah, we do work all around the country, licensed in 22 states, including the Virgin Islands. So
okay.
If there's a claim, we generally try to service our clients wherever they have properties.
Great. Well, that jumps right into it. So Berger Adjustments. So it is insurance adjustment. So who would your client be? Is it the insurance company or is it the individual that has suffered the loss? Who hires you?
Yeah. So we represent the property owner, not the insurance company. So we're always on that side of the claim process, not working directly for the insurance company. So when you have a claim, you hire us to represent your interests and make sure that you don't experience a learning curve in the insurance claim process, so that you can make sure that you get the most out of your loss and in the shortest period of time.
Okay, great. And when we talk about a loss, what kind of property? So normally right off the bat, it would be real estate. So is that primarily what you're looking at when you're going out and doing adjustments?
Yeah. So as a public adjuster, me and my team, we handle insurance claim losses for commercial and residential properties. So it could be a warehouse, multi-unit apartment building, could be a single family home. We also do business interruption claims, handle losses for restaurants, hotel owners, or even just your loss of business to an industrial facility, any type of numerous type of businesses. If you have a property and you've had a claim that has damaged the property, we're going to be able to represent you and make sure you not only get the damages from the building covered, but also any sustained business interruption that you experience due to the loss. When I talk about a claim, I'm really talking about fires, floods, wind damage, hail, you name it. If it's a covered cause of loss, we generally are handling those losses and have experience doing so.
Andrew, at what point in time do you get involved? Is it down the road or is it at the very start of the process after somebody's had a fire or had a loss?
Yeah, I mean, we try to start the process right at the beginning of the claim so that we can get involved with the adjuster, try to help them look at the loss and from our perspective as opposed to how they're looking at it initially. That initial inspection overview is critical at the beginning point to be able to try to frame the loss from our side of things, as opposed to them creating a position of the claim and going back to the carrier and figuring out how much the value is, and then for us to come in later. So a public adjuster's service is really important at the beginning of the claim process. It can be helpful at the end, but if you're going to get the most value out of the claim, having us at the beginning of the loss is really critical. On top of that, I mean, we represent many clients and do pre-loss review of their properties from a damage assessment point and review policies, try to document the properties prior to a loss occurring at times, depending on the size of commercial property that they own, and try to help them and be part of their protection network even before a loss occurs.
Well, yes,
that's a great point.
So not just after a loss. In fact, it actually makes sense for some property owners to actually be in contact with you beforehand so they can plan ahead.
Yeah, I mean, most times when a loss happens, this is the most important investment for most people, and they have no idea what the next steps are. It may be 10 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night, and they're saying, "Okay, I'm going to call my insurance company at that time and just give them the keys to this thing, and hopefully they'll figure it out." And on top of that, there's a lot of solicitors that come out to help kind of board up the property and mitigate the damages. And you need to be able to navigate that properly with the right team, right group. So if you are a property owner and own multiple buildings or have multiple restaurants, it's good to meet with a public adjuster and prior to a loss, and create kind of a protection team that when or if something happens, and if you own enough property, it's eventually going to happen. You need to have that in place, and that's important.
Yeah, so you meet with the consumer and review their policy, and maybe make suggestions on what they should tweak or additional coverage, or just to plan ahead. If they do sustain a loss, that they're going to be covered in the best way possible.
Yeah, I mean, we're licensed to just handle the claims, non-interpret policy. That's an attorney's job, but we also we are looking at the policy and say, listen, maybe this is something that you could talk to your agent about. A lot of times recently, more locally, Norwood Hospital had a bad flood on last Saturday. This was about a week ago, and there's tremendous flooding. It hadn't happened in 50 years, and a homeowner called me, and she owns 5-6 buildings in that area, and they all got flooded. And you look at the policies, and there's no flood coverage. But a lot of times with the coverages that you're reviewing, they may not be able to be afforded, or they're way more expensive than what you would expect. So people have to take that risk when they're insuring a property, insure to value ratios and so forth, of what exactly they're getting in their policy, and understand that. And we try to help kind of explain that and say, hey, you have an exposure here, or your wind deductible is a percentage of 5%. That's a big, or 10%. That's even bigger. Or if your sump pump backs up, you have a $10,000 coverage. So that's what we try to help.
So it sounds like more business advice as opposed to legal advice per se, I guess, to make sure you're covered.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great. Now you said you're in a number of different states. It sounds like maybe you spend a lot of your life on the road.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say half of my business is in the New England area. We have an office in Brookline, and we're down in Providence, Rhode Island, right downtown. So we really spend most of our time in and around New England and all the states there. And then we do some wind damage claims from tornadoes. We're down in Nashville, Tennessee this spring. Before the pandemic, and then we also do hurricane work. So we were in Florida, we were in the Virgin Islands, and it generally starts from a referral basis. So if clients from Massachusetts have properties in these other areas, we can service them down in those locations, and that's where it's all come from.
Yeah. So it sounds like, just based on, I guess, the natural events, it's somewhat seasonal. Do you have sort of a higher demand in the hurricane season and stuff like that?
Yeah, I would say the in New England, the biggest kind of season where you got to be really careful about having damages is during the winter, when everybody's home and you got 5 feet of snow sitting on top of that roof. You're going to have some leaks, and property owners, commercial owners, better be getting crews out there to remove the snow off the roofs. That hasn't happened recently in the past few years, but 2015 is in my mind right now. So, I mean, you got to be aware of those times. And that's, for the most part, around New England, the biggest period, sometime between December and April, is when most people experience their losses. But you never know. The pandemic's been a very odd experience because with a lot of people staying at home, it's been kind of another winter, or extended winter, and people make a lot of mistakes. Not so many commercial losses are occurring, obviously, because people aren't in the buildings and their systems aren't up and running fully, but at the home, there's been a tremendous amount of different incidents.
Yeah,
that
so
have
let's
occurred.
talk about that. Let's sort of dive into how the pandemic has changed business. So we've had a number of different guests on the show and talk about how the pandemic has affected their individual, businesses. What do you see that's different right now? So obviously you said there's more people at home. I'm assuming that maybe some people are taking on some home improvement projects or things that they're just not really equipped to do, and that's creating some issues. That's just my guess, though. Not speaking from personal experience, but just
Not here anyway, right, Patrick?
yeah. Is that the kind of incidents that you're seeing, or what's going on with the pandemic? How has that changed what you're seeing?
Well, I mean, on a minor level, yeah, there's been a lot of people staying at home and running their heating system or air conditioning systems. They've been just running a lot of the toilets are going, everything's moving. So it just generally the influx in claims are happening more so than in years past.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think is common just with so many people, just like in the winter where everybody would be home. But the biggest thing has been how the insurance company has been handling the pandemic directly, and then the resulting effects of the pandemic when you do have a loss. So if I could break that in, the first thing is
Yeah.
If you have a business and you've sustained damages from this, either a distributor has been affected from COVID, or your business directly has been affected, you obviously need to review your policy fully, and I would consult with an attorney that is specialized in insurance claim losses. So not personal injury, but property casualty claims, an attorney that is knowledgeable about your policy, that can review it fully and give you a overview of your policy and the chances of getting covered during that time. Most carriers have not made, most if not all carriers are denying coverages unless you have specific pandemic coverage. Now, I'm not an attorney, so we estimate and evaluate damages from the loss. So we can handle the business interruption aspect, but when it comes to the legal elements of a claim like this, you need to discuss this with an attorney. However, just looking at it, a pandemic is substantially different than what a virus and bacteria exclusion is, which is what most of the carriers are looking at. And Massachusetts has a mass virus exclusion, but this is not a virus. This is the reaction to this is far larger, and you have a lot of questions, and people should be filing business interruption claims and putting the pressure on the insurance companies to pay them. But it is a huge uphill battle with the insurance company, which is a multi-billion-dollar business, and they are going to fight this tooth and nail because their exposure is, beyond imagine across the country and nationally and worldwide with some of the surplus lines carriers. So that's the one thing there.
Yeah, I mean, I always think of sort of business interruption insurance more so if a building was physically damaged. Okay, so there was a fire, or you see it on the news every so often. A car drives right through the plate glass window in the front, and the business is shut for a while those repairs are being made. I never really thought about it with loss of business. How someone could potentially be covered during the pandemic during loss of business.
Yeah, I mean, maybe your business hasn't, you didn't have damages directly there. Somebody you're working in your building didn't come and work and had the coronavirus and spread it around the building. But there's, depending on the policy, you should look at the policy. There are different endorsements, and the language in the policy is pretty critical to that. I'll give you an example. Down in the islands, it's possible that commercial property that depends on cruise ships coming into port, that's where they get all their business. All their business has been shut down because they were directly physically affected.
Yep.
I mean, you can make the argument that their line of business has been directly affected by that and potentially put a claim in. But I think first thing is you have to go through your attorneys to review the policy conditions, see if there's a chance for that to happen, and then evaluate the damages and negotiate with the insurance company if you
Yeah.
even get to that point. The biggest thing that most people are going to be affected by, and that's the problem is with this, is it's going to stretch out for a very long period of time. The insurance companies are going to fight it. What most people are going to be affected by in the business is if they experience a loss during the pandemic period. So if you're a restaurant owner and you just experienced a fire or water damage in the middle of the pandemic, you have a host of issues you have to deal with. Number one being, how do you evaluate the business interruption? Because what they do in business interruption is they're looking at the what your track record was for the past few months to try to create a trend as to where your business was going. Well, you could have been, killing it in February, and come March, you just fell off the shelf. And now the insurance company isn't covering you for the damages because you've been shut down for the pandemic. And now they're gonna hit you again because of the pandemic. So
Man, talking
can't have
about
your
getting
cake and eat
kicked
it
when you're
too.
down. Wow.
Yeah, it's really tough. So we want to look out 3 years before, try to create a better trend in 19 and use that trend moving forward. And it's going to be a negotiation to argue with these carriers, which are going to say, no, the pandemic has affected your business. You're not the same business. We're not going to be using those projections. They're not realistic. When, if not for the pandemic, then all of this wouldn't have occurred either. So there's going to be a real struggle there. The thing that business owners can do is they can document their property right now, take photos of what the state of their property is, keep really good records of their monthly profit and loss documents, tax returns. Get those things, at least make sure that they're in place in the event that something like that occurs. But it's going to be a tough road for a lot of people to try to figure out.
Andrew, let's say I'm a business. Sorry, Patrick. I'm a business right now, and let's say that happened to me. I had a restaurant, maybe I had a pizza business, right? So I had some business going on, but it was 1/5 of what I did before, just to pull the number out of the sky, and I have a loss, right? So what's the advantage of using you rather than me going straight to the insurance company? Let's say I have some of my I's dotted and T's crossed. What can an insurance adjuster, what can you do above and beyond what I can do myself, or what expertise can you offer that I may not have to get me through the process of dealing with the insurance claim?
Well, I have a CPA that works with us, that all he does is property law, business interruption for property losses in businesses. Their focus is evaluating all of your returns, trying to create the most favorable opinion of the damages and what your sustained business loss is going to be during that time. And then also understands the details of what credits the insurance company is going to take, any lost wages, any lost food stock. We review that as well. So having a public adjuster on your side for the negotiation as well as the evaluation of what the damages are to your business in the business interruption aspect is really an important piece, and guide you through that period. Because at the end of the day, you're going to try to find a happy medium between this, and that's really critical. Most people in negotiation with business interruption, look, then neither party are going to be happy at the end of the day. But if you can try to lift yourself above what maybe you were going to do in the pandemic versus what your 2019 results would have been, I think you're going to find yourself in a much better position.
Are you doing a lot of travel now? How's the pandemic supposed affecting you? Are you spending more time in New England now? I say that as you're sitting in an airport in Detroit on the way to Indianapolis.
I'm hidden away over in this corner here, trying to do this call. Yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna affect a lot of things. In fact, insurance companies aren't sending agents, not all of them, but there are some that aren't sending adjusters out to claims. I'm not going to mention the carriers, but When you submit a claim, they say, great, send me your numbers. And, they have a duty to inspect the loss at the time and properly evaluate your claim. And you also have a right and should properly submit your claim of damages, but they can't neglect their responsibilities in the process. So
Is that making things easier or more difficult on you if the insurance company doesn't send someone out to physically inspect the property?
On a small claim, it's not a big deal because you can submit those claims and document the loss and show the errors. But it's when it's really complicated that's where we get into real problems. Insurance companies are switching to kind of remote adjusting on claims under $50,000. So they may have a mitigation guy come out with a phone, not an approved phone. It could be a Samsung. It could be an iPhone, and take it around and evaluate what the damages are. I've had a few claims in those situations, and they're sitting in Ohio or somewhere else and trying to write your loss. So that's one thing. And the second thing is remote adjusting. We Matterport scan all our properties that we evaluate. So you can do a digital walkthrough of all the your claim and evaluate that. And it's great for documentation, but for water losses, it's particularly more difficult to see all of the saturation and damage due to water as opposed to like fire. But I think we're going to all have to adapt here in how we handle claims and limit our inspection times and do a lot more remote calls and just like all businesses are.
And do you think that that's going to be really, I guess, more the norm when it comes to insurance adjustments, sort of the remote and less on-site physical inspections by the insurance companies?
Imagine it's a lot less expensive.
Yeah.
It is a lot less expensive. A lot less. It's less expensive for them to operate that way, but I don't feel like we build relationships with these adjusters. It's not always adversarial, and we're able to look at that situation and explain the damages to them directly, as opposed to looking at a Matterport scan and trying to figure out what wall was damaged and where. It's really important to have that interaction on site and see what's going on there. And some things just can't be done online, but I think a lot can be avoided in the beginning processes. But when it comes to negotiation, some of those things have to be done in person for sure.
All right, cool.
You deal a lot with, so in terms of, I suppose, that pre-loss, you deal as it property managers? Is it individual property owners? Who are we call them clients, that are on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, so, we try to do the best we can in meeting as many property owners as possible and management companies that manage residential, commercial properties all around New England, hopefully. Their losses, when you're dealing with a commercial property that sustained damages, you need to move very quickly in order to rectify the situation so that you can get the tenant back in as fast as possible. Back to the business interruption aspect, you really want to make sure that you're not relying on the insurance company to cover your rent here. So as soon as we can get the tenants in there, or as soon as you can get the business back into the location, the better. So like you said earlier, talking about the immediate response to a situation, you really need to get an adjuster in, get a mitigation company in, so we can evaluate the damages, figure out what needs to be torn out and where, and then the repairs as soon as possible. And that's how we try to handle claims.
Very good.
Yeah. So one of the first calls should be to Andrew.
Well, I'd hope so.
Yeah.
Look, listen, you when you're dealing with a small claim, you definitely shouldn't go directly with a contractor to deal with it, because the money's just going to go into his pocket. You need to figure out what you want to do. You should review and get 3-4 different quotes from contractors on damages. But when you're dealing with a complicated claim, and you're dealing with a really important asset, you should definitely reach out to a public adjuster, and I'd be happy to take their call and talk to them anytime.
All right. Speaking of which, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, so I can be reached at burgeradjusters.com online, or you can go and give me a call at my cell phone, my office number.
So your home number. So when the place burns down at 3 a.m., we want to call you and wake
Look,
you
you
up.
can call my cell. It depends. It depends. I'm pretty tired here right now, but you can call the office at 617-608-3372. Or you can go to burgeradjusters.com and just send me a note, and we'll get to you right away.
I'll make sure we get all your contact info tagged in the post as well, so people know how to reach out to you.
Hey, Patrick.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Declan,
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Great having you on. Want to thank Declan for inviting you. Just I think an interesting topic. You brought up some things that I really wouldn't have thought about when it comes to insurance, and really, I guess the best advice is sort of that planning in advance and working with you to make sure that you have all the right coverages.
Yeah, we hope so, and our goal honestly is really just to help these clients and make sure they move on from this. It's not a dragged out process. We're not here, just to slow things down. And really want to be that advocate for you in the end. So I appreciate the time explaining our business and what we can do. And thank you so much. Well,
hopefully it wasn't too painful, and we can hopefully have you back again sometime. And maybe when you're not busy flying all over the world, maybe from the Virgin Islands, it might be a nicer backdrop than the airport in Detroit. So let us know next time you're down there.
Claims. If I only had claims there, I'll take you to the other places next time. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks.
All right, guys. So thank you to Declan, co-host here on the Wicked Awesome Report. Declan O'Toole from Select Real Estate. Thank you, Declan.
Thanks, Patrick.
And I'm Patrick Whaley, your friend of the mortgage business and host of the Wicked Awesome Report. Going to wrap this up, and a big, huge thanks to Andrew Berger for joining us today, talking about insurance adjusting. And hopefully we'll get Andrew on again sometime in the near future, dive in a little bit deeper as we see some of this pandemic unfold, and maybe get some updates as to what's happening with insurance on that end of things. So again, thank you for tuning in. Check out Wicked Awesome Report Facebook page. Give us a like over there, and you'll be notified next time we broadcast live. So until the next episode, hope everybody stays well and stay awesome out there. Take care.